My daughter took my beach house and gave it to her boyfriend. She said, "It's his now. You have no rights to go there." I just nodded and smiled. When he arrived to move in, he was surprised at what he saw. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Your support means everything to us. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Today's special shout out goes to Angel Cook. Angel, please add your city in your next comments. We're so happy you enjoy our stories. Now let's dive into my story. I've always been a practical woman. Never one to make a big fuss about things. I don't cry at movies. I don't keep old cards. And I've never been good at saying fancy words. But that beach house was special. I bought that house myself when I was 35 with money I saved working 2 jobs. My husband James helped me pick the perfect spot by the water. I painted every room myself. And my daughter Sophie was just 5 when we first brought her there. That house wasn't just wood and windows. It was our happy place. Our family's safe spot. When James died 5 years ago, that beach house became even more important to me. I spent months fixing it up after his funeral. I replaced the deck boards, painted the fence, and planted new flowers just like he loved. I told myself I was just keeping it nice, but really I was keeping his memory alive. I thought Sophie would understand what the house meant to our family. That she'd see it as a place full of love, not just a house to give away. I was wrong. Maybe I hoped too much that my little girl who used to build sandcastles was still inside the woman who now wore expensive clothes and dated men who looked at me like I was nobody. The talk that changed everything happened on a Tuesday. Sophie asked me to meet her for lunch at a fancy restaurant downtown. I should have known something was up when she picked such an expensive place. She usually only calls me when she wants something. We sat at a shiny table, her fancy drinks sitting there untouched. Mine already empty. She smiled that fake smile she uses at work, leaned in close like she had a secret and said, "Mom, I'm giving the beach house to Derek. He's moving in next month. Makes sense. He needs a place. He'll take good care of it. And honestly, you don't really use it anymore." I blinked once, twice. The world kept spinning, but something inside me stopped. I remember thinking, oh, so this is it. This is when I find out that everything I worked for has become something she thinks she can just hand out like candy. I didn't fight. I didn't yell. I just nodded. Smile. Let her think she had won. And that small, quiet action scared her more than any argument could have. She stopped talking, looking at my face carefully. "You're okay with that, right?" I sipped my water, looked right at her and said, "Sure, if that's what you decided." That was all I said. On the drive home, I rolled down the windows just to feel the air on my face. Wind, sunshine, anything but the empty feeling growing in my chest. Sophie didn't ask. She told me. That house wasn't hers to give and she knew it. But she said it anyway with the kind of attitude that doesn't happen overnight. No, it grows slowly. Gets fed. And I had nobody to blame but myself. I gave her everything after her dad died. Let her be sad in her own way. Paid for her college, her car, even helped with her apartment rent. All hoping that someday she'd look back and see what I did and be thankful. Instead, she traded away the one place where my memories still lived. That night I called my sister Rose, my best friend since we were kids. Rose was honest in that way only sisters can be. "You knew she was going to do something like this," she said. "You let her think everything belongs to her." She wasn't wrong. Sophie had always been the kind of kid who thought silence meant yes, and I'd been quiet for too long. But here's what Sophie didn't know and what I didn't tell her over salad and selfishness. The house wasn't hers to give because it wasn't mine anymore. I sold it 3 weeks ago. Quietly, carefully, I found buyers who knew the value of that house, not just in money but in love. The Hendersons. A couple from our same town. Funny twist of fate. The Hendersons were the parents of Katie, Sophie's old best friend from high school. The same Katie that Sophie had hurt badly in a work situation last year. Lies, backstabbing, the whole mess had made Sophie unwelcome in many places she used to go. So yes, I sold the house to people I trusted, people I knew would love it, and maybe, just maybe, people whose presence would send a clear message. I didn't do it to hurt her. That's what people don't understand. I did it because I was tired. Tired of being treated like a doormat. Tired of her looking at me like I was just something old she had to deal with until I wasn't useful anymore. The beach house was the last piece of myself I controlled. And I wasn't going to let her take it from me like some game move at her job. No, not this time. As I sat on my porch that evening, watching the sun go down behind the trees, I thought about James. I wondered what he'd say if he saw all this happening. Maybe he'd tell me I should have stood up to Sophie sooner. Or maybe he'd just hold my hand and whisper, "You did right." Either way, I felt him in the warm breeze, in the quiet that followed. I didn't know how Sophie would react when she found out the truth, but I knew one thing for sure. I'd stopped smiling just to keep peace. This time I smiled because I'd taken back control. There's something sad about how time changes our sacrifices. You work with your hands, hurt them day after day, tell yourself the pain is worth it. And then one day the person you sacrificed for looks at it all like it's just stuff. Not memories, just things on paper. That's how Sophie saw the beach house. Not as the place where I taught her to swim, where we watched dolphins play, or where James made pancakes every Sunday morning. To her, it was just something to trade, a way to make her boyfriend happy. And that hurt worse than the ache in my old bones. The truth was, I'd known this day would come for years. Didn't happen all at once. Sophie had been changing since college, maybe even before. I remember visiting her during her second year, bringing homemade cookies James had helped me bake before he got too sick, only to find her laughing about how old-fashioned they looked. "You didn't need to bring those, Mom. My friends think homemade stuff is weird." That was the first time I saw it. That little bit of shame behind her smile. She wasn't embarrassed of the cookies. She was embarrassed of me. Still I kept trying. Kept showing up. I helped her move apartments. Paid her phone bill until she got her first real job. Listened when she called me crying after her first big heartbreak. I kept giving, thinking one day she'd turn around and say, "Thanks, Mom. I get it now." But thankfulness never came. Just more requests, more assumptions. And I, like a fool, kept giving because that's what mothers do, right? We give until we have nothing left but regret. It was Rose who finally woke me up. She stopped by one afternoon without calling, as always, with coffee and a head full of opinions. "She's not a little girl anymore," Rose said, sitting in my kitchen chair with a sigh. "She's a grown woman who's figured out how to use you without even asking nicely. That's not love. That's just taking." I didn't argue because she was right. I'd known it. I just hadn't wanted to say it out loud. That talk with Rose was what finally pushed me to finish the sale. I'd been waiting, unsure if I was ready to let the house go. Even after Sophie started saying things like, "When Derek moves in," and "Derek loves the ocean view," I still held on. But after lunch, after those cold, mean words left her lips, "It's his now. You have no rights to go there," I knew what I had to do. I called the Hendersons that night. The Hendersons weren't strangers. Katie, their daughter, had been like a second child to me. She and Sophie were best friends from kindergarten through high school until Sophie hurt her badly over a work project. Sophie had used private information Katie had shared to beat her out of a big promotion. Turned into a huge mess. Friendships ended, people took sides. Sophie won at work, but lost every friend she'd ever had, including me in some ways. I never said it to her face, but it was the first time I truly didn't know who my daughter was. Selling the house to the Hendersons wasn't about getting back at her. Not really. It was about trust, about giving the house to hands that would treasure it, not treat it like a prize. Mr. Henderson was a retired teacher. His wife taught art at the local school. They walked through the property with respect, stopping at every room like they could feel the love in the walls. Mrs. Henderson cried in the living room. "This feels like home," she whispered. And I knew without any doubt it was the right choice. Paperwork was easy and quick. I handled everything through a private lawyer to keep it secret. We finished within 4 weeks. I even helped pay some of the closing costs just to speed things up. The locks were changed, the papers signed, and the Hendersons moved in early, well before Sophie's imagined timeline. I didn't tell her. Didn't warn her. She made her move. Made mine. The difference. Mine had real reasons. A week after the sale was done, I drove out there one last time. The road to the house still felt familiar, every turn like muscle memory. I parked by the water, walked the old pier James and I built, and sat on the bench where we used to drink coffee at sunrise. The Hendersons weren't home yet. The house looked quiet but not empty. Not anymore. I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me. The sound of Sophie laughing as James chased her through the sand. The creak of the porch swing I'd bought during a hot summer. The smell of James's famous fish dinners. I thought I'd cry, but I didn't. I felt clean, like something heavy had finally been put down after years of carrying it alone. Driving away, I felt the strangest thing. Not sadness, not guilt, but clarity. Sophie thought she could give away what was never hers. Thought my silence meant I'd given up. But what she didn't know, and what she still doesn't, at least not yet, is that her mistake wasn't just thinking she was in charge. It was underestimating the woman who had bought that place with her own hard work. Let her bring the celebration and cameras. Let Derek puff out his chest and act like he'd won something. I won't be there to see it, but they will. And when they do, well, they'll learn just how fast a dream turns into a lesson. The sun was just starting to set over the hills when I got the call. I was sitting on my back porch sipping the last of my warm tea and watching some birds fight over a spot at the bird feeder. My phone buzzed once. I saw Sophie's name on the screen. Ignored it. Buzzed again, then a third time. Finally, a fourth time with a text message. Why is there someone in our house? Call me now. I didn't move right away. I just stared at that message like it came from a stranger. A house. 2 words that had enough attitude to knock the wind out of anyone. I took one last sip of my tea, leaned back in my chair, and let the wind carry the silence. I already knew what had happened. I'd seen this coming weeks ago, watched the storm clouds gather, and now the storm had hit, right on schedule. The Hendersons had moved in the night before, 2 days earlier than planned. They wanted time to settle in quietly before any big drama. We'd agreed I wouldn't be there. No sad goodbye, no awkward meeting, just a clean break. I told them Sophie still thought the house was hers to give, and they promised to stay calm if she showed up. But I also had new locks put on, changed the gate code, and hired a security company just in case. Not because I was scared, but because I knew better. People do crazy things when their fake power gets taken away. And Sophie had built her whole idea of herself around thinking that everything I had was just waiting to be handed over to her. She called again. I picked up this time just to get it over with. What's going on? Her voice was high, stressed, and sharp enough to cut glass. There are people inside. Derek is sitting in the driveway like an idiot, and there's a guard, an actual security guy, telling us to leave. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't match her panic. I just said, that's because the house isn't yours or his. I sold it. For a moment, silence, just breathing, hers fast, mine steady. Then she exploded. You what? When? You didn't even. Are you kidding me right now? You didn't tell me. You just sold it to who? You don't get to be mad, I said quietly. You told me it wasn't mine anymore. You said, and I remember exactly, you have no rights to go there. You made your choice. I made mine. In the background I could hear loud voices. Her boyfriend, someone swearing, a lot of noise. Sophie's voice turned desperate. This is crazy. They're telling us to leave. Derek is freaking out. Mom, you embarrassed us. That was the moment right there. Not you hurt me. Not I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. No, just you embarrassed us. I closed my eyes and smiled. Small, sad, and satisfying all at once. This isn't about embarrassment, Sophie. This is about respect, something you've never shown me. She sputtered. You blindsided me. This is going to ruin everything. Derek was going to move in next week. We told everyone. He brought his stuff. Then I suggest you tell them the truth, I said. That you promised them something you never owned. She hung up. The next morning, Rose showed up with a local newspaper and a smile so big it barely fit on her face. Heard your daughter caused quite a scene out at Sunset Beach, she said, handing me the paper. Page 4. Security standoff at beach property. Mistaken owners turned away by new residents. I didn't laugh, but I didn't feel sorry either. Rose sat across from me, opening a soda. You know, I've seen you work 2 jobs to buy that house. I've seen you fix that roof with duct tape and prayers, but I've never seen you build a boundary like that. She patted my arm. Proud of you, sister. I didn't say much. Just nodded. Let the moment sit there. Later that week I got a voicemail from Sophie. Not a call, just a recording. Her voice was lower, the anger gone, but not the meanness. I can't believe you did this to me. You made me look like a liar. Derek thinks I tricked him. I don't even know what to say to him. You humiliated us. Played that message twice. Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she think that maybe, just maybe, she'd crossed a line. It wasn't about me. It was about how I looked. How her little power game had fallen apart in front of the person she tried to impress. And still I felt a tiny bit of pity. Not for her, but for the girl she used to be. The one who used to sit next to James on the porch swing and ask for another bedtime story. That little girl wouldn't have done this. She would have known better. But that girl was gone. So I deleted the voicemail. I poured myself some lemonade and I made a toast. Not to getting back at her, but to finally choosing myself. The Hendersons later told me Derek tried to bluff his way past the security guard, claimed to have papers, called the police, made a big show out of it. But the documents were clear. The deed was real, and no amount of tantrums or name-dropping could change what was already done. The Locks didn't know him. The land didn't either, and neither did I. I knew she'd come eventually. Sophie was never the type to let things go without a fight. Embarrassment didn't sit well with her. It stuck like wet clothes, choking her pride until she squeezed it out on someone else. I expected yelling. I expected insults. What I didn't expect was how quiet her car was when it pulled into my driveway. No screeching tires, no slamming doors, just a quiet engine, a long pause, and the careful click of heels on concrete. I didn't get up right away. I just sat there on the porch with my tea, pretending not to notice her standing 10 feet away, arms crossed, anger barely hidden behind an icy smile. You sold it to them, she said finally. There it was. Not a hello, not an apology, just the accusation. The poison wrapped in that one word, them, was clear. I took a sip before answering. I sold it to people who respect what it is. Sophie stepped forward, her eyes wide with disbelief. To the Hendersons. After everything Katie did, you picked them over me. I set my mug down carefully on the table beside me, as if being steady could protect me from her anger. No, I said calmly. I picked them over the version of you that thought she could give away something she never earned. She stepped back like I'd hit her, blinking fast. You're my mother. You're supposed to be on my side. I let that hang in the air, heavy and sour. Being your mother doesn't mean agreeing with every selfish thing you do. Sophie's voice cracked. I did this for the family, for Derek. He needed a place. No, I interrupted, standing up slowly. You did it for status, for show. You gave away my house to buy favor with someone who couldn't care less about who bought it or what it meant. She turned away then, arms crossed tight over her chest. And for a moment, the fight left her shoulders. You made me look like a fool, she muttered. I walked down the porch steps until I stood beside her. You did that all by yourself. She spun around red-faced. I'm your daughter, she snapped. And you sold our family home to people you know I can't stand. I didn't flinch. You gave away my home like I was already dead. The words hit like a hammer. Her mouth opened then closed. She stumbled back half a step, arms dropping to her sides. For once, there was nothing to say. She looked smaller suddenly, like the little girl who used to sneak cookies before dinner and blame the cat. We stood there in silence until she finally asked, Why didn't you just tell me? Because you wouldn't have listened, I said. You don't hear things when the answer isn't what you want. She wiped at her eyes then, angry at the tears more than at me. Do you even care what this did to me? To my relationship? I didn't answer right away. I wanted to. I wanted to reach into that hurt and offer something soft. But I couldn't lie, not to her and not to myself. I care that it had to come to this, I said slowly. But I don't regret it. A car pulled up, then Rose's car. She stepped out, looked between us, and raised an eyebrow like she'd walked in on something she'd been expecting all along. She didn't say a word, just leaned against her door, arms crossed, waiting. Sophie noticed her and got angry. Oh great. Your sidekick's here to celebrate. Rose gave her a tired look. I'm here to make sure your mom doesn't end up on the evening news, she said. You look like you're about to throw a flower pot. Sophie turned to me, jaw tight. This isn't over. I shook my head. Yes, Sophie, it is. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you might start figuring out how to fix what you still have. Her face twisted with something between sadness and disgust. You think this makes you some kind of hero? No, I said. Just a woman who finally said no. She didn't say goodbye. She just stormed off, heels clicking like gunshots on the pavement. Her car sped away seconds later and then it was quiet again. Too quiet. Rose walked up beside me and let out a long whistle. Well, she said, that went better than I expected. I didn't laugh. Couldn't. Not yet. I don't feel good about it, I admitted. She nodded. You weren't supposed to. It's not about feeling good. It's about feeling right. I stared down the street where her car had disappeared. Part of me wanted to run after her. The other part, the part that had been walked on for years, stayed put. Think she'll come around? Yes. Rose shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. But at least now she knows where the line is. That night, I sat alone on the porch and thought about every word. Not to doubt myself, just to let the weight of it settle. I thought about the years I'd swallowed my voice. The times I'd said yes when I meant no. The way I'd twisted myself into a shape that made room for her selfishness. No more. She wasn't a child anymore. And I wasn't her doormat. The first message came 2 days after Sophie's driveway meltdown. I was washing dishes, something James always did with careful, patient hands, when my phone lit up with a message from our family group chat. The chat had been mostly quiet since Christmas, a place where people shared baby pictures and dinner photos, the digital version of small talk. But that morning, someone had dug it up like a shovel to dry dirt. My sister-in-law Linda. Sophie said you sold the house without telling her. What happened, Mom? I stared at the screen, not typing back right away. Another message followed, then another. Suddenly, it was like every cousin, niece, and family member had decided to turn my family boundary into a group-wide vote. Tommy, Sophie's cousin. Mom, that's harsh. Family supposed to help each other. And Clara. That was James's house too. Thought you'd want to keep it in the family. Each word landed like a tap from a judge's hammer. Opinions wrapped in politeness. Hidden scolding. I scrolled for a while, watching the righteousness pile up. Each person sharing their own version of the story without ever asking me what happened. Because Sophie got to them first. Course she did. She was always first to tell her side. Always ahead of the truth. I didn't write a book in response. Just a few lines. I built that house with my own money. I paid every bill, fixed every problem, and watched my husband die on that porch. Sophie told me it was no longer mine. So I sold it to people who would respect it. That's the whole story. Then I attached a photo of the deed transfer, legally signed and stamped weeks before her so-called gift. For a few minutes, the chat went silent. Then came the trickle of quiet private messages. Clara. I didn't know she said that to you. I'm sorry. Linda. That changes things. I'm sorry too. But the one that stood out came from Tommy. Still think you should have talked to her first. Doesn't matter what she said. You're her mom. That was the one I read 3 times. Not because it hurt, but because it showed everything wrong with how we're taught as parents, especially as mothers. Doesn't matter what she said. Doesn't matter how she humiliated me, how she used my silence. What mattered was that I was the parent, and parents are supposed to take the hit. I put the phone down and walked out to the porch. Rose was there like she always seemed to be lately, peeling an orange with the patience of a saint. "You see the fireworks?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Family came out swinging." He chuckled. "Let me guess. You're the mom. You should have taken the high road." He nodded. "Like I haven't been doing that for 20 years. She leaned back in her chair and stretched. Funny how nobody asks why she thought it was okay to give away something she didn't own. I thought about that as the sun went down behind the houses. How quickly people expect a mother's sacrifice to be endless. How easily boundaries get recast as betrayal when they mess up someone else's comfort. That night, I got a call from Mrs. Henderson herself. "Mom," she said, her voice soft and careful. "I just wanted to thank you again. Mr. Henderson and I are truly grateful. We already started fixing up the garden. Found some beautiful old tools. You left them for us." "Those belong to James's dad," I said. "He always wanted them to stay with the house." Mrs. Henderson was quiet for a moment. "We'll take good care of everything. I promise." After we hung up, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me. Sophie hadn't reached out again. I imagined her walking around her apartment in silence, her boyfriend grumpy, both of them mad about wasted plans and broken promises. Maybe she was angry. Maybe she was ashamed. But she hadn't said a word. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. I should have felt victorious. I'd drawn my line, enforced my boundary. But what I felt more than anything was a kind of sadness. Not for the house. I'd already made peace with that. No, I was sad for the dream I'd carried for years. The idea that someday Sophie would turn back into the girl who used to pick seashells and leave them on my nightstand. That version of her didn't exist anymore, and maybe hadn't for a long time. The next morning I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name in Sophie's handwriting. Inside was a single printed photo. The beach house in summer. Bright flowers blooming. James in the yard with Sophie as a little girl. Both of them laughing. On the back in small writing it read, "I remember too. S." No apology, no request, just memory. I stood there for a long time holding that photo like it might break. And maybe that was her way of saying sorry. Not reconciliation, not surrender, but recognition. A crack in the pride, a moment of grace. I didn't need more than that. Not now. I'd already made peace with my choice, but I took the photo inside and put it on the refrigerator anyway. The house was gone, the fight was over, and the quiet had settled in like dust on an old shelf. I woke up earlier these days, not because I had anywhere to be, but because I liked the silence before the world woke up and asked for things. There was something sacred about sitting in that stillness with nothing but the tick of the kitchen clock and the hum of the refrigerator. I used to hate mornings after James passed. Used to reach across the bed hoping to feel his arm and instead touching cold sheets. But now I just breathe in, out, letting each breath remind me I was still here, still standing. Sophie hadn't called. Not since the photo. No texts, no voicemails. Just that quiet acknowledgement tucked into my mailbox like a peace offering carved out of memory. And honestly, I didn't expect anything more. That photo said what she couldn't or maybe what she wouldn't. Either way, I'd stopped holding my breath waiting for the girl she used to be to come walking through the door with some grand apology. Life had taught me that sometimes closure doesn't come in a conversation. Sometimes it's in the decision not to answer the door when chaos comes knocking again. Rose swung by a few days later. She didn't say much, just handed me a brown paper bag with iced tea and cookies like we were back in our 20s again. We sat on the porch like we always did. Two old women in lawn chairs watching the neighborhood kids ride by on bikes that were too big for them to handle. "So," she said, opening a bottle. "How's it feel?" "How's what feel?" I asked, though I already knew. "Having your power back." I leaned back in my chair and watched the sky. Feels quiet, I said. Like something I forgot how to miss. She nodded, munching a cookie. That's the thing about boundaries. They don't stop the storm. They just make sure you're not the one left cleaning up the flood. I thought about that long after she left. About the years I spent trying to be the peacekeeper, the provider, the parent who never raised her voice even when her heart was breaking. I thought about how many times I'd let Sophie step over my tiredness, my grief, my limits. All because I thought that was love. But love without limits isn't devotion. It's a knife. That weekend I drove past the old beach house one last time. Not to go in, just to see it. The Hendersons had put up new flower boxes, fresh paint. Mrs. Henderson was out front watering plants, and Mr. Henderson waved at me from the porch with a hammer in one hand and a smile on his face. I didn't stop, didn't roll down the window. I just nodded, a woman nodding to the past and letting it stay there. Back home, I pinned that photo Sophie sent me to the fridge with an old magnet from James's favorite diner. I looked at their faces, James's laugh frozen in time, Sophie's cheeks round with little girl joy, and let the warmth spread through me like hot chocolate on a cold day. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Tired in a way that felt earned, like finishing a job that took far too long but knowing the foundation was finally solid. If Sophie called tomorrow, I'd answer, but I wouldn't apologize. Wouldn't rewind the tape and pretend none of it happened. I'd listen maybe, but only if her voice came without entitlement. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes loving your child means walking away from the version of them that keeps hurting you. It means accepting that the person you raised might grow into someone you don't recognize. And it means knowing deep down that your worth was never tied to how much you could endure. So I sat back in my chair, the porch creaking beneath me, and watched the sky turn into evening. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. Sometimes the most painful truth is this. Not every family bond deserves to be saved. When someone you love crosses the line, the strongest move isn't getting back at them. It's taking back your peace. If you've had to walk away from someone you raised, share your story in the comments below. We understand how hard it is. Like this story and subscribe to Granny's Voice for more stories like this. You're not alone and you're not wrong. Remember, setting boundaries isn't mean. It's necessary. Until next time, this is Granny's Voice reminding you that your peace matters too.